80s, they'd asked me to go and interview local bookmakers in the West Midlands area, so I'd done that during the 1980s and 90s. And then when I left BT, it coincided with Mary taking on the role of editor of Boss magazine. So whereas I'd just done one or two occasional articles, I now became a sort of feature writer, and it was a matter of going and interviewing the. It was a niche magazine for the off-course bookmaking industry, predominantly the independents. So we would go around the country and interview bookmakers and suppliers and PR people like Mike Dillon and Simon Clare, and we did that for several years and actually thoroughly enjoyed doing it. We went saw bookmakers in the Channel Islands, and we went to meet administrators in the Isle of Man, and covered all parts of Britain from Cornwall right up to the north of Scotland, including the most northerly independent betting shop that existed. It was about 10 miles west of John O'Groats. So we met fabulous people. We really did, and a lot of them sort of remained friends throughout. Great independent bookmakers, independent characters. Ben Keith, just one of them, who were actually then taking on the major firms and doing it very, very well.
Right, now I suppose that dwindled with the dwindling number of independent bookmakers in the end.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the reasons that we finished it about 2018, because we knew that the number of independents were in decline. They were a dying breed, and because of that, obviously, it was getting more difficult to get the advertisers, which paid for the magazine, as it was a free distribution, and the time was right. I think also, I'm not the most technically gifted, and a lot of it was becoming a little bit over my head, and we got out, I think, at just the right time.
Okay, several times you've mentioned Mary, who sat right behind us here.
Yeah.
You got married in the paddock of Mary's local course, Suffolk Downs in Boston. Was it a race day?
Oh yeah, it was an hour before the first race. I had to get one of the guests to hold my binoculars while I got married. That, strangely enough, wasn't the most memorable day that we had at Suffolk Downs, because Mary, the big race in Boston is the Massachusetts Handicap, and Mary got speaking to Philip Mitchell, who had this wonderful globetrotter running stag, who you might remember, and as he was going to take the horse to America, suggested that the Massachusetts Handicap at Suffolk Downs might be a good race to go for. He'd never heard of the track, he'd never heard of the race, but sure enough, about 3 weeks later, came this bit in the Racing Post: running stag will be aimed at the Massachusetts Handicap. And I thought, oh, I wonder where he got that idea. And ran there, I think, in '99, and finished second. And then Philip was so enthralled by the welcome that he got there, that he and the owner, Richard Cohen, said, we're going to go for this next year. So in between, Mary and I did something stupid we'll never do again. We followed the horse when he went to Hong Kong, to Dubai. We went to Kentucky twice in the space of 3 weeks, all over the place, and came back to Boston in 2000 for the Massachusetts Handicap and won it. And Mary was primarily responsible for that. Without her, the horse wouldn't have been there. And that was just such a fantastic feeling. When Philip Mitchell then came and said, thank you, Mary, at the end. I know how much it meant to her and how much it meant to me.
And I'm assuming that racing brought you and Mary together. You haven't converted her to this extent.
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, Mary was professionally involved, writing for the New England correspondent for the Blood Horse, which is the major American racing magazine, and also for 2 local newspapers on racing. So she was very much engrossed in that. It was a long story, which I won't go into, about how we got to meet, but essentially Mary came over from Cheltenham in 1996, and we'd been corresponding for about 5 years, just sending letters and race cards and that. So I said, I'll arrange the accommodation for you and trips to the racetrack, and we met, and we very quickly became a couple. So it was great, really good. 18 months later, we're married.
Fantastic. And there's someone else's life that you've sort of changed, or you had a hand in changing, is Steven Powell, who you both spotted on Channel 4 Racing.
Very proud of that. Stephen had written to Tanya Stevenson on the morning line wanting to know what went on behind the scenes. And they invited him when they were covering racing from Warwick one day to come along, and they sprung an interview on him. Mary and I saw it. Mary said, "This kid's bright." We found he lived in Birmingham. We took him under our wing. We introduced him to Lester Piggott, Bruff Scott, Peter O'Sullivan, and said, "Stick with this," because all his friends could talk about was football at school. The upshot was when he was 16, we took him to Boston. He ended up calling a race at Suffolk Downs, and that sort of got the whole thing started in a way. Called some harness racing when I was taking him up on a Monday night to Rill, to Prince Racetrack. And then next thing you know, he's race day presenter at Newmarket, at Huntingdon, wherever. And in 2022 was promoted onto the roster of professional racecourse commentators. I hasten to add, he has done this purely through his own ability. We were able to give him the first step on the ladder, which we're very, very proud of doing. But he's done it all himself, and it's just a great joy to us.
Fantastic.
Because I think, actually, Simon, that young people have got to be encouraged to come into the sport. There's one thing that annoys me more than anything else. It's when you have family fun days, and family fun days comprise bouncy castles, face paintings. And I'm saying to the clerks of the course and the managers, where are the people letting them try on colours? Why can't they paint their own colours? Why can't you have for older kids someone trying a race commentary? Why can't you take them a bridle or a saddle and show them how things work? And the majority of them look at me as if I've come down from the planet Zog. But that, for me, is how you get them interested. You've got a captive audience there, entertain them with racing.
Absolutely. And entertaining people with racing is what you've done, but through words. Your latest book, Let No Memories Fade, which I've been reading on the train
Oh,
for,
yes.
thoroughly enjoyed it. Heroes of the Gold Cup.
Yeah.
So it's 100 years, basically,
Yep.
anniversary. So that was obviously why you decided to write it this year. It's not chronological. It's not written chronologically as such. There's lots of little bits to dip into: personalities, horses, events. What Why did you decide that format? 'Cause it definitely works, in my opinion, anyway.
It was Andre Klein, the assistant general manager at Cheltenham, who invited me to write it, having been at Warwick when I compiled the history of Warwick races. And it was his idea. He said, "I don't want it chronological." And I thought, well, neither have I, because other books have been done on that. So we wanted to include, obviously, the great horses, the great races, the owners, trainers, jockeys, but also the side things such as the TV coverage, the history of where the Gold Cup was made, the history of sponsorship, the view from the clerk of the course, from the general manager, what it was like to breed the winner. 100 things, different things, roads and pubs named after winners, 100 different things to do with the Gold Cup. And that's what I think makes it such a different and diverse book.
And we talked earlier about a long time gone was done before the internet. Now this is done with the internet. Is it a lot easier now to do your research?
Yes, it is. I mean, luckily I've got quite an extensive library with form books and that, but we also had a subscription to the British newspaper library, which Mary was able to go through and find the relevant bits. But there's also, just interesting to if it's not going off at a tangent too much, my favourite author of all time was a guy named Denzel Batchelor, who wrote a book called The Turf of Old. He was a general sports writer, wrote about cricket and boxing and football and rugby, everything. But he did a report on the 1949 Grand National, which is still the best report I've ever read in a Grand National. And I did pay a little bit of a small bit of homage to Denzel Batchelor on the back cover. And if you look at A Long Time Gone closely enough at the end of the Book Fastly chapter, there's another little homage to Denzel Batchelor. He was just my favourite author.
And how much did you learn? Have you shown us it yet? How much did you learn new to you that surprised you?
I think the biggest surprise was a 2-horse, 3-mile chase at Sligo, which ended up in a dead heat. And both of the dead heaters went on to win the Cheltenham Gold Cup in successive years. I thought that was unusual. We discovered that when Golden Miller beat Thomond in one of the most famous battles of the Cheltenham Gold Cup, Dorothy Paget that morning had been stuck in Germany, managed to get a flight over and then another flight from Croydon or wherever it was, and got to the race course about 15 minutes before the race. Little things, little I didn't know that moments. That's what I wanted to include.
And what are your favourite bits from it? Either your own memories or memories that you've dredged up from the history books?
Well, from personal memories, the first time I went was 1969 for What a Myth, galloping through the mud, when I went with a school friend's dad who was a bookmaker having a Bosman's holiday. I was at the 1987 Gold Cup when it was delayed by 80 minutes because of the snow, when a friend had given me her badge for the day, and halfway through the afternoon I was starting to wish he hadn't. But obviously watching them on TV, Dawn Run and Desert Orchid and so on and so forth, I mean, great memories. There are just so many, and I think we've captured some of them in the book.
I can't speak to you without talking about one of my recent interviewees who I thoroughly enjoyed meeting, Ian Watkinson. That you helped with his book.
Yeah, I mean, I've known Ian for 40 years. I'm proud to say I'm godfather to his son. And he was one of the last of the die-hard ride everything, break your collarbone and go out and ride in the next race sort of people. What he did then wouldn't be allowed now. Medical records would not be allowed. But he rode in a golden period and rode horses like Tingle Creek, Night Nurse, Sea Pigeon. And yeah, just a great guy all round.
Now, it did make me laugh when I asked you for some information to help me write my questions, and you told me about a schoolmaster that said to you that nothing good would come of this obsession with horse racing. I assume he's long gone now, but he wasn't a very good judge, was he?
Well, I do remember that day, and it was the Monday after the Grand National, and of course I hadn't been seen in school on the Thursday or the Friday. And when he said, "What was the Aintree Spring meeting like this year, Pitt?" and then said, "This obsession you've got with horse racing will do you no good at all." Well, so far it's taken me all the way around the world. I've written half a dozen books. I was radio correspondent, racing correspondent for BBC WM, formed the West Midland Racing Club, and most of all, of course, met Mary, like myself, freelance journalist. We've been married 26 years. I consider myself extremely lucky, and I'd just love to have met that teacher and say it didn't do me too much harm.
Good man. Now, was he the English teacher?
He was a general master teacher, actually. I do remember him very well, though. I do remember him.
The final question, Chris,
Yeah.
has the next book already been, have you started on it?
I don't have what they might call winter project going at the moment, so I'm open to offers. I'm told that Wolverhampton celebrates its 200th anniversary in 2025, so if anyone from Dunstall Park would like to approach me, I'm open for business.
And anybody watching this in 2030, hopefully you've read it.
Hopefully so, and there'll be others in between, I'm sure.
Brilliant, Chris Pitt. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Simon.